Definitely, the girls are hungrier than the boys. The standard for boys is like either you have to really do well or, oh God, now our son can't do anything. I have like a memory that surprises me sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, I can't forget. I don't know what's wrong. Why do we only feel like we need to speak English? It was a bit of a struggle to be taken seriously that, I think I just want to teach. A lot of tension in the home, a little bit of sulking, a lot of silent treatments. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Now, one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on was you recently went to the U.S. What was that like, going into a culture that was a little bit different?
Was just how much space there was, how big the roads were, the highways, but also the lanes and everything. It was just huge. There was just so much space. And then my second thought was, wow, they stole all of this. Because for me, my indigeneity and like you said, that comes from my very deliberate intent to be rooted within my Naga self, It hurt when I saw that and I thought, wow, they've stolen all of this. I actually went on the visit to look at and to meet other indigenous peoples, plural peoples. And, when they were talking about themselves, they said things like, we have so many different tribes. I thought, yeah, us also. We have so many different languages. I said, yeah, us also. We can identify each other based on what we're wearing, our colors, the patterns we wear. And it was just, in a way, like a homecoming, I said, yeah, that's exactly like us.
So you saw more similarities than differences?
So many similarities, so many differences also because for them, they're coming from a place of loss that we have never experienced. Praise the Lord.
100%. I think when you look at other people's struggles and how much they have to go through, and just look at the Aboriginals in Australia. Like, how much they have to go through.
There's like,
So when you put that into perspective and you look at the bigger picture, it's like, oh my goodness, like our struggle is tough, but compared to that, it might as well just be a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, for sure.
And because we hear a lot about Native Americans, we hear about the struggles they go through. But the fact that the scars there, specifically in Canada, it was so deep because I could still see the natives had harbored a lot of resentment towards the white people, what they call the colonizers. It was to the point where I was learning about their history, how they had built these reservation schools, that they were forcing these kids to cut off their hair. They were forcing them to speak the common tongue, and a bunch of just assaults, brutal rapes, and just things that were happening to them. And how years of reparations just wouldn't be enough to even come close to what they were doing.
Yes.
So I think, it does put a lot of things in perspective. So in that way, I'm sure that when you saw the differences as well, Nagaland may not compare much to something like that. But at least
Thank
we have...
God.
Yeah.
Thank God. No, I really mean this. Wherever I went, so it was the spaciousness first. The second was just the excess. Just the kind of... even the food, I'm a big eater. I eat a lot. But the thing is, one order would be so much that I'd have to pack half of it. I take it back to the hotel. The next meal, I think, I'm only here for a visit. If I don't eat something else, so then I wouldn't eat those leftovers. And it just became, I felt guilty. Like, I love our meat. Oh God. I love that, sometimes we even know the pigs who, like we've seen these pigs, getting reared and then we eat them. And I think we've got a very good life here. Yeah.
In that way, would you recommend going out, for people to really understand the stark differences? I think when we've lived here our whole life, there's that sense of entitlement. There's that sense of we've taken things for granted. But
also I think it can sometimes lead to a dissatisfaction that is not justified, because I think, but it's natural, isn't it? It's human. If you've only lived in one place all your life, you feel like everything else is better.
Right. Grass is always greener.
Right. So I think that way travel, wherever it is, even if it's to the next town or to the next colony.
And when you were there, you did do a lot of hikes, a lot of trails.
That was the other thing, Joe, was that I wanted to see the place. For me, it's when I travel, it's not so much about, shopping and all of that. I love to see the natural space. I love to experience culture. And when I hiked around all the different states I went, when I, walked around, I also understood it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I understood, this is why they were willing to do what they did to steal it. No wonder they invented whatever manifest destiny. They killed all the animals. They killed people. They massacred, all of that. Everything that they've done, I could also understand, it's a much baser human impulse.
Right.
But I could understand, no wonder,
It seems like this has a really deep place in your heart when it comes to colonization, when it comes to people invading into foreign land and taking over essentially what wasn't theirs in the first place. What I'm curious about is the way you talk about it, even the words that you said, steal, kill. It's very personal, very explicit. Why does that have a place in your heart?
I don't know.
And why was that the first thing that you were reminded of when you landed in the U.S.?
I think because of my, my inclinations. That's where I'm very big on, indigenous rights, and I'm very passionate about that. And I've done a lot of reading on that.
Was it more personal to you because you could relate in some way, at some level, to the struggles that they were going through?
One writer called Sam Miller, who made a very interesting argument. That book's called Migrants. And his argument was, is there such a thing as indigeneity? The history of the human race, the human species, is one of migration. We've migrated. We started from Africa, we migrated, etc. We went all over the world. So in a way, even if we have been here for many, many generations, at some point in our history, we also came.
So was his point that no land belongs to anybody?
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, the earth belongs to all of us. Makes you kinder also.
Well, it makes you more open to people as well, coming into your land.
Because we're very intolerant, that much I will say, with Nagas, Of course, I'm less racist than I used to be because I'm not married to a Naga anymore.
Was that also a catalyst when you went to Woodstock? Just being surrounded by so many different cultures?
Ish. I think being Naga is also very special because we are multicultural already. I'm half Sema and I'm half Angami. I grew up with aunts and uncles from different tribes. And then I grew up in Chotobosti, which is very cosmopolitan by, within Naga standards, because we had neighbors from, neighbors who are Angami, who were Chakasang, different kinds of Chakasang. We had Pochuri also. It was very multicultural in that sense. And of course, we all do know that, the idea of Naga is a very modern and recent invention, and in a way, perhaps something that, we don't actually inhabit even now. And perhaps the question is, can we ever inhabit, sort of a Naga-ness, without, I think it has to, as of now, still, it's not as natural. It's more very deliberate. We have to sort of pause and say, oh, hey, wait, remind ourselves. No, you're not Angami. You're Naga, But what comes more naturally to us is, I'm Angami. And sometimes that doesn't even come naturally to you. It's what comes more naturally is, I'm from this village or I'm from this clan.
Why do you think that is?
It's just the way it is, I think. That's how we think of ourselves. No?
Do you think because we're more prouder of our village rather than our identity as like Angami, Sema, or Chakasang?
No. I don't think. I think it's just, how we were in the past, as in we lived, villages where, as we study in our, subjects, republics unto their own,
Well, the reason why I say that is because I know people here who are specifically from Kohima village. There's a sense of pride in that, Kihime is what they say. So I would assume that instead of just being called Angami, they want to be represented as from like a more sophisticated part of like a village. They want to be identified as such.
I don't know.
Would that have anything to do with that?
I think, at least for me, I would think of it as the other way around. I don't think I've ever met a Naga who's not proud of being from the village that they're from. Because we live in Kohima, perhaps we keep meeting Kohima village people and we keep thinking, oh, they're so proud of their village. But then the Naga who is saying, oh, Kohima village people are so proud of their village, when you ask them, are you proud of being from your village? They will say, yes, I'm so proud of being from my village, So I think that kind of pride doesn't come from some kind of, conceit or vanity. It just comes from, a sense of validation that, yes, I belong to this village, I have, my people are here, I have a support system, I have a network, I have an identity because I belong to this village.
Does tribalism have anything to do with that?
I think tribalism is, anything when you take it to the extreme becomes problematic. tribalism is a danger, something that we are all capable of. It's almost like we say, I will never steal. And then circumstances, happen, things happen, and then we steal. So in the same way, I think tribalism is an evil that can manifest, and we're all capable of, but we need to be vigilant, because evil things, at least this is my understanding, is, with anything evil, whether it's, tribalism or any of that, nobody does it because you're suffering. You do it, you steal because at that point in time, it's going to get you something, or you're enjoying it in some way, it's going to satisfy something, some need or some urge, So in that sense, even when you say tribalism, it's, we're all capable of it. We can all do it because it can serve some interests. It can be the short way. It can be an expedient way of, getting to some end.
Then what part does nature versus nurture play in that? Are some people inherently evil, or is it because of their environment that they grew up in that, like you said, given the right circumstances, they're able to commit these acts?
So in that sense, even tribalism, if we say, like, let's say, since we're Angami, so let's just be safe and say, this idea, Angamis are very proud, let's say. If people say that, it comes from a place of fear. And if you teach your children Angamis are proud, then your children will also grow up thinking, oh, Angamis are so proud, So it's just, that's the nurture part, and the nature part is we're all human, nobody's perfect. If you see a proud Angami, he's proud not because he's Angami, he's proud because he's human, and proud, chalak, what are the other words we use, all the ways. But in essence, we are describing human shortcomings. We are not describing shortcomings that are attached to tribes. So that is something.
So it's ingrained in us.
Yes, we need to be able to separate, sort of, even if your father tells you, like, this tribe, they're very scheming, let's say, I think for us, the young people, it's for us to think scheming is human. It is not attached to a certain tribe.
Right, or just even having that critical thinking to not just take other people's words. I know, like, our parents are our stronghold, but I think, as I've gotten older, for sure, I realize that my parents have problems just like any other people do. They're not absolutely right. They're my heroes for sure, but they can be wrong as well. They have their own prejudices, their own biases. That doesn't mean I have to inherit those either.
No. And it also comes from their history, and for us Nagas, with each generation's histories, each generation's encounters are very, very, very different from the next generations. And we need to understand where they're coming from. I don't think it's like they don't know what they're talking about, let's ignore them. That's also not the way.
That's not the right step. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I would imagine if we had some of our forefathers here with us, I would imagine them thinking, or feeling rather, a sense of betrayal because of what they had to go through. And then maybe seeing us befriending, quote unquote, their enemy, thinking like, we suffered this much just so you guys can be friendly with them?
Oh, no, really?
Do you think?
No.
You don't think so?
Not at all.
Then where do you think the prejudice comes from, if not from the forefathers experiencing that?
Fear. I think that's where it comes.
So it doesn't come from any truth at all, you think, in how they were treated?
For me, what I've understood is, they have a great capacity for forgiveness. So, but it comes from fear, if somebody has hurt you, or if you've seen somebody hurting somebody else, then of course, what are you going to say? Stay away from these people, that's it, But the thing is now, it's not, I don't think anybody's going to be upset, why haven't you done this? If you say, look, times have changed, circumstances have changed, we've understood, each other in different ways. I don't think anybody's going to be upset.
So when you hear a quote like that people are inherently evil, does that kind of piss you off a little bit?
I think it depends on our own, sort of our, in a way, God-given dispositions. I'm a hopeless optimist to the extent that I've harmed myself because I'm that optimistic. So for me, naturally, I just see good in people, and I feel, I find it quite unbearable trying to sort of just think only that, people are inherently evil. So for me personally, only personally, if you meet a misanthrope, then they will say, people suck. But the thing is, for me, it's like, no, I like to see the bright side. So
Well, I'm also a huge believer of you attract who you are. And I think when you send that energy out, you receive that energy back.
Yeah.
And we're just going to go back to this a little bit, but I think it also goes into how you treat yourself. And when you were jogging, when you were going to all these trails in the US, one thing that struck in my mind was, oh, this is somebody who takes care of herself. This is somebody who values and prioritizes herself. Of course, you know, you have your own things going on. And immediately after that, the second thought was, why do some people feel, specifically in this case, some women, you know, they feel that, okay, once they have kids, once they have a husband, they're my priority now. Now I'm like last.
In general, the more a woman sacrifices, you know, the more she is elevated, the more she suffers, the better a mother she is, you know. So it's, the body becomes sort of the index of how much suffering she's going through.
Almost like a martyr.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've used that word in my writing. And so it becomes, you know, motherhood becomes martyrdom, you know. So, and it need not be that. It can be absolutely joyful. It can also be a lot of negotiation with, you know, whether it is the husband or the kids in terms of, hey, I just need a little time for myself, you know. And I think teaching husbands, teaching children, you know, and teaching society, because as of now, this is not the default setting. You know, we are not a society that says, yeah, mothers are people in their own right. You know, we're not a society that says, oh, mothers should, you know, indulge themselves a bit. We're not quite there yet, you know. Of course, we're just 1 week or, well, is it 1 week away from after Mother's Day? So we're still in that buzz, you know. Everybody's still feeling like, yeah, mothers, you're great. But then, you know, I mean, by next week, they've forgotten and they're thinking, why are you not suffering enough?
Do you think right now in our society, do you think women or mothers are looked on as second citizens?
We are taught all that language, all the jargon of, you know, gender equality, gender rights and all of that. And we come and we, you know, sort of very anachronistically impose that into our setup without realizing.
Sort of like a mini colonization thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just, I think we should be very, very careful not to characterize, you know, the men. Even if we are a patriarchy, we need to be, at least for me, I like to be very, very careful not to characterize Naga men as women-hating, chauvinistic, women-oppressing people. At least here in Kohima and, you know, within more urban Naga spaces, our life has changed. We have time. But I think one thing that is beginning to worry me is how many of the modern professions that we have now are becoming feminized or masculinized, which I find is, again, we're going, I mean, why do we always keep going to one extreme or the other? You know, so I'm a teacher, right? I teach in college. When you look at the education profession, it's becoming feminized. You know, we're having less and less men joining the teaching workforce.
Is that specific to the language and the subject that they're teaching?
Not necessarily.
Or is it just in general?
I think in general, if you look, you know, I mean, to the extent that now if you're a teacher, most people assume it's a woman, you know, and that's very tragic because our children are going to be in deep trouble if they're only taught by women. Starting to take root is the idea of, you know, women being better teachers, let's say, than men, or women having more patience to deal with children than men. You know, it's feminizing a profession that should not be feminized. And then nursing. Nursing has always been a, you know, very female-centric profession. But I think we are also reaching this point where we, in Naga society, we need to think, why can't men make good nurses? You know?
Well, that was going to be my next example because when I was working at the hospital for like, I interned at a hospital for almost 2 years. And the amount of male nurses that flooded in was insane. Like you said, it used to be a female-dominated profession, but now it's become where men have sort of broken that stereotype. It was almost 50-50 actually.
And you have to say where this is.
Oh, this is in North America.
There you
right?
go. Yeah. I give a lot of career counseling to young people. When I speak to parents and, you know, when I say, oh, if your son wants to do medical-related, you know, professions, but he's not getting into MBBS, have you thought of nursing? My question is met as if it's a joke, no? Like, oh, what are you saying? You know, it's such a preposterous idea. Like somebody told me that here in Nagaland, the engineering department, I don't know, is there how many, but somebody had said engineering, is most of the officers are female now, you know. So it's amazing because, you know, especially when we think of engineering, again, we think men. So the fact that women are, you know, sort of, but it needs to be a give and take. It needs to be, that flexibility needs to go both ways. You know, so as much as there's this idea that, you know, women empowerment means opening spaces that were previously male dominated to women, the reverse is also true, is opening female dominated spaces to men.
Well, what you said before, the fact that parents would almost laugh at you if you would suggest their son going to nursing, do you think that would be a byproduct or just even a direct product of what we call now toxic masculinity?
Could be, but I mean, I even if you don't reach the level of toxicity, you know, even if just our ideas of masculinity, you know, as something that is men as being incapable, is it? Or of nurturing, of caregiving, just as much as it was very radical and very different at one point in time to raise girls to say that I want to be a doctor one day. Is it possible for us to also direct our attention to our boys and say, let's raise some boys who say, I would like to be a nurse one day? I mean, why do we assign a gender to certain professions? That's all I want to say. That's what I want to say. That's the question.
It's even in those gender reveal parties. I think people are even saying to the point, well, why should pink be associated with girls? You know,
yeah,
why
because
should blue?
Initially pink was actually a boy color. This is a very Kohima dig at like Dimapur people, with all due respect. But I did see, this is eyewitness evidence, I did see, you know, a very, by any standards, a very, very masculine man in Dimapur wearing pink boxer shorts and a banyan and doing shopping. So there you go. I mean, I don't think, you know, color threatens Naga masculinity. Well done.
Yeah,
you know?
this big muscular guy. Shout out to your gym as well. But I was even thinking, you know, this yearly festival that we have here, Nagaland Anime Junkies, like people cosplay.
Yes.
There's this guy, we all know him, the big Naga wrestler, Vinuzo.
I see.
He came in and he's a big guy. You know all these Naga wrestlers, right? He's a big guy. He came in and he was wearing like cat ears. On top of his head.
Done.
I just thought to myself, seeing that, look, that's a guy, his masculinity isn't threatened because he knows it doesn't define him.
Absolutely. But I think that's true for this generation. Their ideas of gender, their ideas of femininity, masculinity are much, much more progressive and, you know, healthier.
I even saw some guys dressing up and cosplaying as like maids. That was maybe too progressive.
Yeah. No, I won't say the words, but I'm like, oh, only love for everyone. Yeah, it's okay. Well, there you go.
So I remember, because we had been planning this podcast for like about a year now. And I remember when I first came across your work, because I know you said like we met when I was a kid. I just can't remember.
You won't, yeah.
But I remember coming across your poem, Horror.
Yeah.
Labeled it horror.
Yes.
What were your intentions when you titled it the way you did? Did you see a problem, an issue that was being ignored largely by the general public?
You know, that poem is actually about how we treat our land. I see our land as, you know, a woman. So what is the worst way you can treat a woman?
Violate.
Yes. And that's why I said whore. That's what we are doing to our land right now. We are raping it, her. We are not asking for consent. We're tearing her apart. The weather's changing. Not sure if we're going to have the Kohima of my childhood anymore. Yeah.
And this happened within like a span of 15 years.
Yeah.
So if you can think 100 years, a part of that, when I see that, I definitely can resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And when I read that, there was that constant repetition in past tense. I had lovers once. I had lovers once. And then towards the ending part of it, you change it to present tense. I have no lovers now. Only assailants who take what they want and do as they please.
Yes.
I remember reading that and just thinking, it's very personal. There's no way you wouldn't be able to write something like that if you had no idea of what it's like to have consent taken away from you or to be in this case, violated. Now that you told me that it's about to land, but my question prior was like, did you happen to meet with people who felt the same way? Did you talk to people who sort of were resonating with you on this topic?
Such an interesting question, because this whore, the poem whore, is actually part of a collection of poems. It's from a book of poems. The title of that book is Sopfünuo. I had done some research on violence against women, Naga women. I remember, I think it was Wede Kronaro. He's a writer. When he read this book, he said, I'm just so angry. I'm just so angry at how this can happen. It's not men doing violence against women as such. It's society creating conditions that allow for these violences to be done to women.
I mean, if you even think about it more, not even just domestic violence, what about marital rape, which is a huge problem?
This is a very big debate in India as well. I mean, as long as marriage exists, and as long as you have two adults who are two independent adults, when one wants something, maybe the other one doesn't, Now we have a language, now we have a way of thinking about it, Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that, because again, in my, in that book, I have two poems that, look at marital rape as well.
And then even just the way that you titled that whole Sopfünuo. I don't know if I'm thinking of the right one, but isn't that the story of the lady and with
who
the
was
baby?
turned to stone? Yeah. I mean, that's very much. I mean, Sopfünuo for me is, something that comes from a very personal place, because my father, he doesn't have any sons. He has 3 daughters. And his grandmother is from Rosoma. So for him, this folktale has not come as folktale that we read in Naga book of folktales. This is a folktale that has come from, like an oral inheritance. So, and he used to tell us the story, and what would be his concluding remark at the end of the story? He'd say, anytime, if your husband is not good to you, you can come back to me. And that for me, like we talk about Nagaland being patriarchal, etc. But our patriarchy is very different. We have many kinds of patriarchies. I'm not saying that it's so ideal. There are patriarchies within our society that will tell a daughter, no matter how bad your husband is, suck it up and stay with him. But there are many other patriarchies. There are many other patriarchs, like my father, who will say, yeah, just the slightest thing, come back to me. Our way of treating women is, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's far more nuanced and far more generous.
Well, yeah, I would say it's because of the community that we have here. We foster that sense of community, and not even just to the father, but like you could run to even your cousins. There's also that sense of everyone is sort of sharing that same experience.
Right. And so that's the beauty of folktales, and that's the beauty of our oral traditions, is that there are versions. And I think it's very, very important for us to recognize the legitimacy of each of these versions. Also, the teller would modify it according to who was listening, so that it's like this is actually an indirect way of teaching you something about yourself, So sometimes, I'm sure you've heard that, no?
For sure.
You hear some folktale and you're thinking, hang on a second.
That sounds a lot like the situation I'm in right now.
Yeah. I think there's a hint in there, especially this Angami way, we do that. Yeah, once there was a fox, and he met the owl. And you listen to this folktale and suddenly you realize, hang on a second, I'm the owl,
That's so true. I've even noticed that, especially with Bible scriptures as well.
That's like us taking ownership of the Bible in like very strange ways.
It is funny. And I would imagine, because I remember hearing that story, I heard that from my mom as well. And if anyone knows my mom, they know that as nice as she is as a person, she is so assertive and confident. And that's not really something that you expect out of her outside demeanor. And what I got from that story was like, oh, okay. It was almost like she was implying that this was the first Naga feminist in a way. Just to walk away in that version that she was talking about was that she essentially ran away from an unhappy marriage. When I think back to it, and I think back to the way that she had said that story, I was like, wow, if my mom can take inspiration from that story, just from a folktale, right? How much more impact and influence can it have once it's being passed down as well?
Absolutely. And, it's not just Sopfünuo's act of leaving an unhappy marriage. It's also about her village, Rosoma, taking her stone and putting it inside the village. Because for us, if something happened, if you did something, if you died for, taboo or inauspicious or, transgressive reasons, you were not buried inside the village. People would go and put you in a place where nobody could find your body ever again. But Sopfünuo was brought back inside the village. She's still there. So the fact that, even her village, for her village, what she had done was not wrong. What she had done was not dishonorable, and they took back. So it's such a beautiful thing, Again, like I said, when we think about patriarchies, we must think about it as many different patriarchies.
And many different facets as well.
Yeah.
Because even for a folklore back then, it really makes you question about gender dynamics. When we think about masculine and feminine energy, it makes you question that kind of thinking.
Absolutely.
Maybe they did value women way more than we thought. Maybe it was just our own preconceived notions.
I wouldn't say maybe. I think they did.
100%?
Yeah,
Okay.
for certainty. When we talk about patriarchy, we're talking about many different facets, And one is we are patrilineal.
What does that mean?
Means we take our descent from our father. So you take your father's name. So we trace our descent through our father's lines instead of our mother's. Like I'm married to a Khasi, so they're matrilineal.
So he would take his mother's last name.
He has his mother's last name.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But they are as patriarchal as can get. They're as patriarchal as us. That is one aspect, And the other aspect of patriarchy is also the many other ways in which, society polices and controls and, the surveillance of women in order to ensure that, they are sort of maybe a kind of second class that will serve the interests of men. So that way, like even the scripture also has been interpreted in many ways to justify, the subjugation of women, right? So we need to think about, patriarchy within all of these different dimensions, And so for us, yes, we are patrilineal. And for me, again, as an indigenous person, I really don't, I have no problems. Let us continue to be patrilineal because it's okay. But then many times I think what becomes very threatening or why people become fearful and threatened is because they think that just because we are questioning other kinds of dynamics within patriarchy, we are also then saying, let's throw the baby out with the, bathwater, Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating when you talk about language and how much it affects the way we see and interact with the world. I remember watching this documentary, this was like years ago, about this African tribe. I think it was the Himba tribe. And researchers were just following them around, and they very fast, they found out that their native tongue had very limited vocabulary. And in doing so, it limited the colors that they saw that were exposed to them. And it was very interesting because they had grouped colors like blue, green, red, and brown. They were all grouped together as one color.
Oh,
so
fascinating.
How important language is. Do you think in our own way, because of modernization, because of the way the youths, how often are we referencing back to our past? Their biggest critique is that they don't speak the language.
Yeah.
They don't speak it well. And the stories of our forefathers, that's being lost. Is that inevitable? How can we preserve this?
No, it's not. And I think that way, the younger generations are also becoming aware of this loss. Like for my parents' generation, if you were caught speaking in any of your tribal languages in school, you were punished, you were fined, you're made to stand outside class. So, how do you expect, that kind of generation to feel positively about traditional culture? Also a sense of shame, and also because of, colonization of our minds, this idea that, anything Western is better, anything Western is cooler, anything Western is, superior to our traditional cultures. So these are things that I think now, because we are in, a post-globalized world, younger generations are beginning to discover, wow, there's so many people on this earth. Not everyone is from the West and not everyone is white. Of course, the rise of, K culture, the, the popularity of, anime, all these things. It's allowed us to sort of look at the world and understand it through a multicultural lens. So I think that way we are more interested, and as we become more interested in looking and learning about the rest of the world, we suddenly realize, oh, hang on a second, we don't know so much about us. So that way younger people, I mean, at least the young people that I work with, the young, my students, young people that I meet, all of them, have this desire. Maybe they don't know how to do it. And that's, as an educator, that's something that I try to do, is say, maybe these are the ways that you can do it. But the thing is, they do have that desire now. They feel that absence. They feel that loss. And I think that's very, very important.
Well, you are one of the big proponents of someone who is, you could say, modernizing that, bringing your own twist. And you are also a big advocate for fashion. I think you have some pretty interesting looks as well. You've bleached your hair blonde. At one point, you did the undercut. So when we put that label back, we speak with our clothes. What were your intentions?
From a very young age, I've been very much influenced by punk and goth culture, and I think that goes back to, again, like that book of poems is, I think you can really appreciate life, and you can really, sort of feel being alive when you park yourself a little near, the morbid and everything. But yeah, I mean, life's so short, yeah? Why take yourself so seriously? What's going to happen? Your hair will grow back. You can dye your hair back, nothing will happen. Although I'm not encouraging this. Now people will watch this blog and be like, yeah, that's not what I mean. Whatever is yours to do, whatever it is, that you want to do with yourselves, I mean, life is too short, so...
Yeah, I mean, when I first met you, that was sort of the impression that I got. A part of that would just made me think about, okay, how much was that just having a strong dad, having a strong mom? How much of that was her environment? How much of that was Woodstock? Being around people like that who challenged you, being away from your parents even.
I think it could have been any boarding school for that matter, but at least for me, I had a great boarding school experience. But I think really it is my parents. They raised us with always a very social outlook. Like we'll give you whatever it is we can give you. It is in our power to give you, but you need to give back. Joe, especially now that I'm a parent, I am even more grateful. Sometimes I just randomly call up my parents just to say like, hi, wow, you guys did such a good job. Like you've raised me so well, And I have no idea if I'm going to be able to do that with my kids, but I'm going to try, But I think I think I was just brought up well, because Woodstock was also a great experience.
How old were you when you left for Woodstock?
I joined when I was 10, and I was there till I was 18. So
Wow.
I was there for 8 years. But it was a great experience. But not everybody who went there had reaped the kind of benefits or, sort of turned out the way that everybody else did. Even if you're a person who has never left home and you're studying in Kohima your own life, if you have a dream, and if you take care of yourself and you pursue it with honesty and passion, something will manifest. So it honestly, and for that matter, I'm so grateful to my parents. But the thing is, just because you haven't had a positive upbringing, even if you're from okay, maybe you have more hurdles to cross. But the thing is, at the end, do you want to look at, oh, I didn't get this, I don't have this didn't happen for me, or is it, okay, sort of just really taking stock and saying, okay, fine, I come from a horrible, sort of domestic situation, but I'm going to make something of myself, so it depends on the person.
One of the things that my mom would always tell me was that, look, once you become a dad, you're going to know how hard it is managing a kid like you.
No, but yeah.
I was like, that makes me think. Because I'm not going to lie, I really did give my parents a hard time. I was so brash. I never listened to them, even as a kid. I mean, I was just so rebellious, I always had my own train of thought. Very contrary to my brother and my sister, they had their own, of course, stages. But I think to this day, my dad reminds me, man, you were something else as a kid. You were really special. And when I look at myself, I kind of feel that way.
Oh, I wasn't perfect. I was more your kind. Yeah. I gave my parents hell. And that's, I think, why I'm so grateful. I think, wow, how did you even manage?
Right. Do you think you'd be able to manage a kid like you as well as they did?
Yeah, man. I hope my kids don't turn out like me. Dear God, yeah. If any of them turn out like me, I'd be... No, but it'd be karma. I mean, there would be justice. I would say, okay, fine. This is, the universe trying to balance something that, I did. But yeah, fingers crossed. I hope none of my kids, sort of rebel and sort of in the way that I did. Now I'm getting nightmares. I'm thinking, oh dear, no.
This has just become like a therapy session.
Yeah. I think with my parents, I will not say they were very controlling. They're both doctors, right? So they had, sort of typical traditional ideas of typical Naga thing. Like either you want to do science, or if you don't want to do science, you want to do civil services. It was a bit of a struggle to be taken seriously that, I think I just want to teach. Every civil service exam announcement would be a lot of tension in the home, a little bit of sulking, a lot of silent treatments like, man, why doesn't she just do it, But that way, my mom, I think she always wanted to be a teacher. She's very grateful that, her father made her study medicine because she's the first Sumi doctor. But she was very understanding that way. And with my dad, oh God, my dad and I, we're very strong personalities. We really come to loggerheads many times. But he's somebody, he will just fight you till that very last moment. And then that moment where he realizes, okay, there's no winning this, he just does, a 180 and just supports you like nobody. I mean, like really, it's...
When was that turning point where he was like, this is the 180? Was it when you graduated? Was it when you became a professor?
No. This was when I was already teaching. I was teaching in Hindu in Delhi, and I think at that point he just realized, okay, I think this daughter of mine is not going to sit for any competitive exam. And then all my jobs I got because of him. Because he's the one, he'll read the paper, he'll send me newspaper clippings. And those days, those phone cameras and all didn't exist. My first job was in Sazolia College in Jotsoma. The only reason I knew about it and I applied is because he sent me the newspaper clipping saying, okay, well, since you're refusing to write the exams, you might as well apply for this, And thanks to him, I got my first job. I mean, who could ask for a better dad?
Well, if I were to think of like maybe your average traditional parent, even after that much, I would say pressure, I would just be like, oh, you know what? Okay, screw it. I'll just go into whatever they want to do. And potentially you might not be as happy as you are now doing a job that you probably wouldn't have liked.
Yeah.
So where did you get that confidence to be so adamant in what you wanted to do?
I'm going to blame my parents. They're both really stubborn and I inherited that from them. So it had me like, as much as we were, sort of at loggerheads, I think it was just, they were also meeting themselves in me, because I'm as stubborn as they are. Yeah.
Not even just teaching, but how did you find that literature and reading? Was that always ingrained in you as a kid?
I tried economics and, failed horribly. So then I was like, well, eco's not for me. And that was, again, me just being irritating and rebellious. And then I fell in line.
How did you find that passion? Like, did you have like a eureka moment where it was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Because when I always think about the word passion and your motivation for your career, I always think it's a tad bit overrated, overused as well. How often do we have the luxury to monetize what we love? And the fact that you were able to do that, the fact that in some capacity...
I'm not going to the extent of monetizing. I haven't, that sounds very, prosperous. And it's sort of maybe if you're really in something for the money, teaching might not be the job.
Definitely not. And it's probably the most underappreciated job as well.
Perhaps underappreciated materially and elsewhere. So we don't go hungry, but you're not going to live that life, teaching. But Joe, I've always liked teaching. As when we were small, like literally when we were 4 or 5 years old, I would make my sisters sit and I'd write on the blackboard and I'd teach. So it's something that I've always enjoyed. Once I started teaching, oh God, it was such a high. I realized this is it, like the first lecture I gave, the second lecture I gave, and I just thought, I am where I'm supposed to be.
Was it better for you because you ended up teaching a class of adolescents talking about their 20s, they just graduated high school? Would it have been a different story if you were introduced to maybe like high schoolers?
For me, I knew I wanted to teach college level. Yeah, I really, really admire people who teach school level. For me, I really fail to understand, how school teachers are paid less than college teachers. I am not understanding this. I think primary teachers need to be paid like triple, quadruple. And many times I hear parents saying, no, that they'll say like, oh, the pronunciation is also not right or something, or they made it. I mean, who cares?
I think accent is probably the most overrated thing ever. My best friend is Singaporean, and his accent is horrible.
Aww.
But his grammar is so elite. It's insane. He taught me the importance of, look, you can have the most amazing accent, but you could be saying nothing.
Right.
And he was sort of the first, and I'm so glad he's my best friend because a lot of the, I would say, biases that I had, he destroyed them without a doubt. In some ways, I always looked at that and look at him as sort of that standard. And teaching for 16 years in that space, what was that transition like with the students? How they thought? I'm sure like when you started your first year, you could potentially argue that the students might have been a bit more close-minded, maybe they're a bit more shy.
One very, very obvious and different thing about teaching in Nagaland as opposed to teaching in DU. And when I taught in DU, I taught in Hindu college, which is one of the best colleges in India. So I had students that were they were brilliant. They knew what they wanted to do, or they knew how they wanted to do it. They would submit assignments even if I hadn't even asked them. They would ask for extra classes and all of that.
So they take initiative.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I'd have lectures where it would end and I'd say, hey guys, I haven't even gotten a word. Coming to Nagaland, one thing that is very, very obvious from the beginning is how reticent our students are. They literally come to class as passive vessels, waiting to be filled. Your work is not just to teach, but your work is also to rehabilitate them in a way. Like how do we get this group to become a group that will voice objections, ask questions? Personally, when I speak to them one-on-one, hey, what's up? Why don't you want to speak? They have many different reasons, but the thing is, this is a culture. This is a culture of education. I think that's not just at the college level. I think it starts from the very beginning. We haven't made it. This is our colonial inheritance. But thankfully, we also have a new generation of teachers who are not, who don't walk into a classroom and say, all of you shut up, So thank God, it's so amazing. But I think we have our work cut out for us.
100%. I was speaking to a professor, and it goes along the lines of what you said. I was talking about rehabilitation. But he said it's not even just that, but you're actually teaching them to unlearn bad habits and then teaching them again, which is so difficult because they've had this throughout their life. By the time they've gone to college, it's ingrained in them. It's muscle memory. So that could be a case of nature,
right,
and how they've grown up in their environment. So yeah, I think that's changing, like you said a little bit.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
This is one of the reasons why I brought the topic of Woodstock up, because I went to a boarding school too, and I always tell my parents that was probably the best investment that we ever made, because I remember going into the Nagaland system, because I did study here for quite some time. There was just an absence of critical analysis. People were just afraid to raise their hands, and when the teacher picked on you to answer, even if you got the answer right, you'd be teased by your classmates. They're like, you're trying to be smart, huh? I came out of that system worse than when I went in. There was that sense of fear placed in me. And I remember going to this new school, this new boarding school. The moment we were in class, the teacher didn't even have to ask a question. My classmates, they were already like shouting out the answers. They were being proactive. And that was very new to me. I was just even shy to just take a chance at an answer, whether it was right or not. It was just, I had no sense of trying to even attempt it. And I could definitely see where those, because I for sure would have been just like them if I had been stuck in my own bubble here. Was it almost like going into the grassroots? Because Delhi University had all these proactive students, all these students who were ready to engage in the conversation. Was that almost like a culture shock coming back here?
Culture shock in terms of not just this education, but it's also our culture. I think young people feel like there are very few spaces where they can be themselves and share their opinions, etc.
How do you think you've created that space for them, that safe space? Because I've met some of the people who've come out of your lectures, and they say like, man, it's almost like we're not judged for the answers that we might potentially give. There's no wrong answer.
Oh,
Was sort of the
that's-
point that we're trying to get at.
That's so nice. Yeah, I think it helps if you have a mohawk. Because they think, yeah, this woman is so weird.
There's no answer I could give that's weirder than that.
And also, I think it's also the subject, you know. I mean, the nice thing about literature in English, I keep saying, you know, I mean, there's no such thing as a wrong answer. You know, you can spin it any way you want.
100%. There's so many ways to interpret it. It's not like math where it's just binary.
And I'm not particular about grammar either.
Really? What are you particular about?
I am a grammar Nazi in, you know, sort of by training. But the thing is, I've begun to focus on what is that a person is trying to say, not how are they saying it. If you speak to somebody who doesn't speak English at all, does that mean they're not capable of critical thought? You know how it is, no? When you have ideas or thoughts from within, but you think, am I the only one thinking this?
Right.
Am I being paranoid, or am I reading too much into this situation? And then somebody says something, or you read a book and you think, and that's exactly what you've been thinking, or they're able to articulate, you know, your discomfort in such radical ways. It changes your life. You realize, oh, I'm not the only one. So it's really helped me to, you know, sort of question the supremacy of English. I'm really reading and thinking about, why do we only feel like we need to speak English? And this is a terrible question because I can only speak English, you know, but I'm also wondering about what are the conditions we can create for our children, the younger generation, to come out as, you know, multilingual. But as of now, English has that, it rewards the people who speak it, you know, whether it's in terms of, you know, social mobility, whether it's in terms of, you know,
social status.
Yeah, status. It's so many. But the thing is, we need to question that, you know, and say, all right, but the thing is it possible for us to, okay, fine, learn English, speak English, but is it possible for us to do that while also building proficiency in our vernacular languages? Why does it have to be either or? Whether it is in the history of Africa or whether it is in our history, colonial history, we've been taught that it is either or, right? You know, you must learn one at the expense of losing another.
Right.
And so, and that's what's rotten in the state of our education system, you know, especially in the department that I am in. I try not to say I'm from the Department of English, because what does that even mean anymore, you know? So I prefer to say I teach literature. As much as doing English honors or being an English teacher gives you that prestige, it does it at the expense of making people who are not up to the mark feel inferior because they don't speak English as well as you know,
Right.
all of that. So we need to question all of these standards.
I'll give you an example. I found this very funny. On my way to like a certain place here in Kohima, and if anyone knows me, they know like my India and my Nagamis are horrible. Like I just try it based out of courtesy because I'm here and I want to learn the language. I remember parking the car to the side and I asked this person in Nagamis, you know, where's this place? I knew how to say that much. And it was very interesting to me that she kept replying back to me in English. It's like, this is really funny. It's exactly what you were saying. It's almost like that has become the standard.
Could be, but you are in Kohima and you know, Angami speak very bad Nagamis. So,
is that what?
Yeah. Maybe she didn't know your Nagamis was bad. Maybe she was thinking, oh God, he's speaking to me in a language I don't know, you know, so yeah.
Going back to your university, and this is something that when someone who's been in this industry, I always want to ask and I always want to know, how do you differentiate from 16 years of experience? How do you differentiate between a good student, a bad student, and an exceptionally good student? Do you have those qualifications? I hear like within 5-10 seconds, you can pick out whether a student has great potential or not.
Oh God, no. I mean, I'm not from that school. It's just interest. Your interest in your own education and your desire to know. That is the only parameter by which I will say you are a good or bad student. So you can have somebody who is really struggling in terms of marks, but attends the classes regularly, has that desire and that intention. You're an amazing student. I have had a lot of students who come with, you know, a lot of ambition, who come with a desire to know, who come from maybe other districts or from very rural backgrounds. They have that energy and the stamina and the passion to just learn. But when they come and they sit in class, they suddenly realize, oh dear God, I don't know the language. I don't even speak English properly. I can't even spell, and so they've come to me very discouraged, like, we don't know what to do, because when you speak, we barely understand what you're saying. Just because a student is struggling doesn't make them a bad student.
I think based off on that, wanting to learn, having that interest, and like you said, you have these kids who come from rural areas and they have the passion. What I found in the general talk is that, especially when these NPSC results keep coming around every year, is you hear the mothers talking, especially the moms, and they keep saying, yeah, people from outside the rural places, they're more hungry. That's why they're cracking all the NPSCs. People, the ones that are here in Kohima, they have everything. They're entitled. They have no passion anymore. Do you agree with that mentality?
Not necessarily, but one thing for sure, in general, definitely the girls are hungrier than the boys. So that's something I will say on public record.
What would you attribute that to?
Mollycoddling of sons, having lowered expectations, So the thing with patriarchy, I think, is that you have two extreme standards for men. Either it is too high or it is too low. And I think as a society, we need to start attending to the needs of our sons and our men. If it's too high, men start doing corrupt things. Because if you expect your father, your father's already working, he has a job, he gives you food, he provides everything for you, he takes care of your mother. But children want, fancy cars, bigger brands, etc. You're pushing, we're pushing our fathers to extremes. Even looking at my own being married and witnessing all the demands I make of my husband. And I make so many demands of him, and then, of course, the children have so many demands. So it's really helped me to see firsthand, wow, when you look at our fathers, they have a lot to do.
Have you heard that quote about fathers? Most fathers live lives of quiet desperation. And I think it really does encompass that.
And in our society, maybe, because, material labor, economic labor, that is something you can't fake, man. Either you can get your son that brand shoe, either you can get your son that car, or you can't. It's not like I can't love you enough. Emotional labor you can. Maybe you can give extra hugs. Even if you don't want to, you can fake it. But you can't give your son, like your fake Abida shoe and not give that. We're putting undue demands on our fathers. We're not appreciating them enough. And on the other hand, also then the standard for boys is like either you have to really do well or, oh God, now our son can't do anything. And with girls, I think we're raising our girls to say, just try. Try hard, work hard. We are, suffering because of our double standards.
Would that be the expectation of the underdog?
Definitely. Girls are hungrier than boys, So, yes, I know. Did you read the very hilarious, there was somebody, I don't know who it was, this man who was just essentially ranting about how women are doing better than men. It was hilarious, But the thing is, that kind of disgruntled frustration, as amusing as it is, also, speaks about that kind of tension that is beginning to arise.
Do you think that's good tension? Do you think that harbors competitiveness for the men to now step up? It's like, look, the women are beating us, like they're whooping our ass right now. We should step up as well.
But why competitiveness? I think, me too, I again, this sounds very like hippie and naive, but competition is so overrated, man.
In what way?
Trying to beat other people, be better than other people, For me, any success I've had because I'm just doing the best that I can. And not focusing on how am I going to beat other people.
But do you think competition harbors innovation? Like Apple and Microsoft, they're always competing with each other for the next big idea.
I don't know how healthy that is. Capitalism rewards that kind of competition. So then it's becoming a girl versus boy type thing, in terms of but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. And imagine what amazing things could happen if, boys were also encouraged to just do the best you can.
Right.
Because whether it is boys or girls, children, or human beings, if you're told that only the best will do, yes, there are a few of us who will say, oh, then I will work really hard and try to do the best. But most of us at some point will realize we're not the best. We will never be the best. And many of us will say, why even try? And that is horrible. So the focus on competition being the best, that's wrong. I think we need to start raising kids who say, try your best, do your best. Have you given your best? That is the focus. Have you done the best that you can? And if we start rewarding that, and if we start valuing that, celebrating that, then you will get to a situation where, it's tried and tested, isn't it, with the girls? It's like we don't have any standards as such, but as long as you do the best you can. So most of the girls are, doing the best they can. I don't think the girls doing well are fixated on, I'm going to beat the boys, They're not fixated on that. They're just trying their best. And so I think it's time we started teaching our sons also to do that. Just do your best. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to beat anybody. It's not a war.
I do agree having a more holistic approach. That pressure is not healthy for anybody.
Yeah, and also then defining, as a boy, what are the careers that will define you,
right?
That define success. So we'll give you everything we can. Now you have to become an IAS officer. Come on. What are the options, I know a lot of guys who will say, if we don't get a government job, nobody will marry us. They're also thinking, oh God, we don't want to be lonely all our lives, I would love to marry my girlfriend, but if I don't get a government job, so all of these things.
Right. Again, this is another thing that I noticed was sort of our disconnect with books. I'm sure you're a huge advocate for it. And how good's your memory? Do you just absorb all these books the moment you read them? Do you have a system? Because for me, once I read a book, most of it's gone from my head.
I have a memory that surprises me sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, I can't forget. I don't know what's wrong. Sometimes I take notes, but usually I don't even take notes,
Were you like that in school as well?
Yeah, I guess, but I definitely, I don't know, maybe it's because I teach. I remember very strange things, but I remember everything. I remember everything people, I remember everything you've said, I'll tell you, when we first met, you were wearing this, and
how much of that plays into intuition?
I don't know. I've never tried memorizing, if you know what I mean, because I think, how memory works in terms of memorizing and remembering, how people who remember a great quantity of information, deliberately remember a great quantity of, preset information. They create little mental maps, let's say the Fibonacci sequence, people who remember that. So they create a roadmap and they remember it, etc. It sounds very elaborate and very labor intensive, but they manage to remember a lot of information. I've never tried anything like that. The max that I do is try to remember my students' names. That's all. Yeah.
So everything else just comes naturally. Wow.
Yeah. Thank God for that.
Do you think you have photographic memory?
Yeah. I have photographic memory. It made me lazy as a student when I was younger. It made me very lazy.
I could imagine, right?
I thought, I don't have to study. And that got me into a lot of trouble because just because you have photographic memory doesn't mean you will do well academically. But the thing is, yeah.
So every past boyfriend is just cringing because you know everything.
No. It is a gift. It can be a curse sometimes, but it is a gift. I think with age, I've understood the importance of forgetting also, especially when it comes to past boyfriends. So it's good to forget some things. Yeah.
Deliberately.
I
would imagine someone who has a nature to overthink. I would think photographic memory is probably the worst thing for you.
Yeah. Yep.
I would assume with your optimism, you're very carefree about the way that you assess information, even though it comes to you in such vast quantities. I think that's how you're deliberately able to.
Yeah. The overthinking, the sort of mind that works even when you're sleeping, all of that, So I never thought I'd have to use the word mental health for myself. But last year, I, sort of got to a point where I thought, no, I need to start learning how to, if not control, manage what's happening in my mind, because this is crazy. Too many thoughts, too many things happening. That way, oh God, without my husband, there are times I have woken him up at night. I literally tell him, look, my mind's going crazy. I can't sleep, So he sacrifices his sleep. But, just having that person who will sit with you and say, okay, fine, so let's sort this out, Yeah, now go back to sleep, Like you said, having friends who are not judgmental.
I think part of that is also being able to filter out the people you want in your life. And I think that comes with age.
Yeah, I think so.
And were you able to sort of do that quite quickly? I mean, because you are a very people person.
I'm a very people person. I love people. I love, I mean, to the extent of being very invasive and voyeuristic. I love learning about people. And I've learned to tone it down a bit, because I think with age, and also, in terms of, because you do have to take the gender dynamics.
Right.
You don't want people getting the wrong idea, etc. So I'm sort of always, revitalized by listening to people. I want to know what your life is like. I want to know what you do, what you eat, why you think the way you do, I mean, it's just...
I'm shocked right now. This should have been the $1 million question from the start of the podcast. Why don't you have your own podcast?
Yeah, so many people have said this. But the thing is, number one, technologically, I'm horribly challenged. And I don't have the time.
You don't have time to just sit down an hour or two just to speak to somebody?
So maybe I'll start with you.
I think growing through the times and with technology, we just had the new Chat GPT come out, the new version, which is insane. I would, in my opinion, believe and think that we're getting more and more disconnected with books. And not even just the act of reading it, just the physical sensation of flipping the books, the smell, the hard paperback covering that you otherwise wouldn't get from like a Kindle or an iPad.
Right.
Do you feel that as a problem, or is just the modernization of book reading?
Such an interesting thing that you're asking, because I'm a book person. I love my books. But a few things. How I went from being a very, hardcore book person, book-only person, to now I have a Kindle, which I got for Christmas from my darling husband. My pandemic gift was a subscription to audiobooks. You can listen to book after book after book as you're knitting, as you're crocheting, as you're folding laundry. Within 1 or 2 months, I got all the Night Owl Award. I got this award, that award. And the coolest thing is, with every one of these awards that you get a free credit.
For a new book?
Yeah. And so since last year, I've never bought a book on audiobooks.
How many books were you going through in like a day or like a month?
Like a short novel you can finish in 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, because they're reading it to you in real time, So a very long book will be maximum about maybe 10, 13 hours, etc.
So you'd be going through these like...
Oh, and it's just wonderful. So audiobooks is amazing. And then Kindle for when you want to read in the dark, when your mind is going crazy at night and you wake up. I don't sleep so much. And then on top of that, with this mind... So at night when you wake up, you can read on your Kindle.
Would you consider yourself like a high-functioning workaholic?
I'm not a workaholic, because all the things I do for fun. It doesn't qualify as work as such. So I'm also learning. It took me a long time, okay? Because actually during the pandemic, I saw a book that had come up on my feed. Because, algorithms, they know you. Dear God, yeah, these psychotic
They're listening.
devils, You're listening, all of you are listening, yes, okay. But during the pandemic, one book, it was a book by Peggy Mohan, came up on my, feed. And I just needed to read it. But there was no way. Amazon wasn't delivering, there was no way for me to get this book. And the only thing... left was to buy it on Kindle. So I downloaded Kindle on my phone and then I'd bought it. They have Kindle Unlimited, right? Where you can read books for free.
Really?
Yeah. So then all that came in, just amazing. So then the light isn't so good. And those days I had, like a really beat up old Samsung phone, really falling apart and malfunctioning. Either the light has to go off because I can't read the physical book, or if I read with that Samsung phone, it was too bright. And it's so funny because I listen to audiobooks when I'm traveling. So this time when I was going up to Sikkim, I asked the taxi driver, do you mind if I listen to something? So I hooked up the Bluetooth and I was happily listening to my book. 2 hours in, he says, madam, I just want to ask, who is this guru that you're listening to? So I said, yeah, he is a guru, of a different sort. But I thought it was so sweet, because...
And especially now, I would say even my brother, like me and him, we don't listen to audiobooks, but we listen to a lot of podcasts. So that for us is like our therapeutic journey, like when we're going anywhere, because some are like just like 4-6 hours long, so you can just keep it on, especially on plane rides. It's really nice. And for someone who invests in a lot of books, growing up, I watched so much anime and manga. And so I would say my ideal woman was very unrealistic. Would you say that was sort of your, I mean, not like the facial proportions.
Yeah, because you said anime and manga, so I was like, unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, but it was just sort of like the personality wise and everything. Can you separate real life from the books? Or is it impossible not to have those expectations when you're looking for a partner?
Joe, by the time I met my husband, I had just turned 30. I think I had more realistic standards. And I just had one or two few things that I thought, okay, if I have this is good enough for me. I mean, come on, yeah. As a young woman, and especially of my generation, I grew up reading Mills and Boons. So imagine if that was my idea of, for me, books are fiction, fiction, etc. For me, these are forms of escape. It's like I said, it's a very sort of, it feeds my voyeuristic pleasure of, seeing what other worlds and places and people are like. I read a lot of nonfiction. I love nonfiction. And with nonfiction, it's very interesting because you're essentially learning about the world. Yes, versions of the world. So I'm not saying that, just because it's nonfiction, that is reality. But the thing is, you're learning about the world. I love reading, popular science nonfiction. I love sci-fi, but I love, sort of reading about sort of whether it's plants, animals, nature, any of these things. So I love reading science, I love reading politics, history, etc. And with nonfiction, I think it really allows you to see the world in more nuanced terms. It allows you to understand the world in a better way. During the pandemic, I thought, pandemic, what were we doing? Yeah, and books were all I had. I really wanted to, but there was a lot of Netflixing also.
So in a way, would you say that the pandemic was like almost a haven for you? The fact that you're able to like accumulate all these books, all these like...
To quote Charles Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, But yeah, it gave me an opportunity to say like, okay, let me just read on cast. With nonfiction, you learn about perspectives that you would never have engaged with otherwise. So in terms of how it affects my expectations of reality, I feel like it broadens my, understanding of reality. And definitely, whatever it is, anything, if you read, you become a kinder person. You become more tolerant. Yeah.
That reminds me of that J.K. Rowling quote, when in doubt, go to a library.
Wow, so lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I remember seeing that quote. Oh my goodness, like, those Scholastic book fairs?
Yes.
Yeah, and I remember like there's just a bunch of banners of these authors, and just span like right in the middle there was J.K. Rowling. I never read any of the Harry Potter books, but that just stood out to me.
My daughter's reading it. I'm the generation that came before it started. I think in another life I would have been a librarian. When I was single and I had the time in life, I used to Dewey Decimal my books. I still think about my books, so this is one of the games I like to play. Is I used to Dewey Decimal my books, and then I would reread some of those books and feel like God. Does it belong in this section? Or can it, it says sociology, but is it really sociology? Silly, useless games when I had so much time.
Well, I would imagine the more you read books, the more you realize nothing can really be put into one single category to define that book.
Unless it's maths, of course it could be, pure mathematics, and you could say,
some numbers guy might see that and just be like, that's a love story right there.
Exactly, it's romance. Well, there you go. See, now you understand my game and you understand why it's so fun.